I was Sofia Vergara's lawyer, one of Sofia Vergara's lawyers, in the 2 different times that her fucking ex, Nick Loeb, sued her in Louisiana for this exact reason. Their embryos are in California. They've never been to Louisiana. The embryos have never been to Louisiana. Basically, neither Nick Loeb or Sofia Vergara have ever been here. I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but like not by a lot. But he tried twice to sue her here because the laws were like sort of ripe for personhood status. So like in one of those suits, maybe in both of those, then like the embryos sued themselves. They were because the law
right.
says that they can that one of the many amazing things with current law is that embryos can sue or be sued.
Welcome to Seriously, the podcast that dives into the baffling.
We can't send them to a prison where there's animals, where there's livestock.
The ridiculous.
Like omelets better than sex.
And downright unbelievable political climate in red states like Louisiana.
So we can't go there. There's no vegan jail.
Seriously.
Welcome to Seriously. We're your hosts, your dynamic duo. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Ellie.
And today is our pro-life podcast. We are going to talk about
That's right.
IVF and the legislation in Louisiana and some of the other crazy stuff that's going on in the country around IVF.
And to be clear, of course, IVF was always a reproductive freedom issue. You mean that it's also now being rebranded, and I think in a fair way, but rebranded as like a pro-life issue because it is literally about people being able to have children.
Creating babies. That's right. Yes, that's right. Before we get into that, what was your Seriously moment this week?
I don't know. I think the Trump administration, again, back at Harvard, that was them telling Harvard that they like could not enroll international students anymore, and the international students had to like immediately like find another school, which is like was I think about a day before people were graduating, and obviously it's not like time to be applying to transfer. All of that I thought was like really interesting and outrageous, and also that thankfully again our courts do seem to be semi-working because it was blocked within 24 hours.
It's so ridiculous. I don't think that most people understand if we just don't allow foreign students to come into our country, like, then we're going to lose so much research expertise, so much technology expertise.
Also, I didn't used to know this, but I have pre-Trump administration, like international students are a huge moneymaker for schools. All the international students I knew when I went to Colgate were like on scholarships, so I didn't realize that. But it's actually like, and this is not like in any sort of nefarious way, but like the majority of international students are paying full freight. So it's actually really important for universities in terms of like, so that they can then give more scholarships to other people. So again, like it actually benefits American students in addition to just like, you know, getting more perspectives, getting training the world. You know, the soft power issue that people talk about, that then like, you know, you come here, you see like hopefully, or at least like previously, like the United States is like a great place to come and learn and then go back to wherever you were from. Yeah, we're like, no, we're getting rid of all of that. And also specifically for Harvard, because, you know, they've dared to fight the administration. How dare they?
It's so ridiculous.
It is. What's your Seriously, Michelle?
I actually have a good news one today.
Oh my God.
I know.
We've been doing too many good news ones.
Well, you know, I mean, we're trying to give people
there is very
hope.
little good news.
Right. Yeah. A little hope in the bleakness is, you know, it's not my brand, but, you know, bear with me.
It is now. Yeah. We're the good news podcast.
All right. So the U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday blocked a bid led by 2 Catholic dioceses in Oklahoma. They wanted to establish the nation's first taxpayer-funded religious charter school. Yep. So the court was tied 4-4.
That's right. Amy Coney Barrett had to recuse.
She did.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't have to.
I don't actually know the backstory.
There's no rules.
She did. That's
There's
right.
no rules saying.
But I don't know
she
why
had to. But she has integrity, so she recused because she had previously advised the organization that was creating the chart.
I want to stop there and agree, but this is a very seriously, is that Amy Coney Barrett is like one of my favorite justices
I know.
these days on the Supreme Court.
She was here in New Orleans speaking at
I mean,
Loyola
I'm not
Law.
I'm not like a fan.
Well, I wanted to go see her, but then I didn't.
But
'cause
like
I'm
honestly,
lazy.
like she asks questions like for real, not just like softball planted stuff. She does bring like intellectual rigor to things before them, and yeah, now also some intellectual integrity. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
her addition to the court was like not a good thing, but yeah. Like it's a, it's just because women always have to be better at their jobs.
Right.
We always have to be doing what they do, but better. So of course, like the conservative justice that they have, the only one who's good at her fucking job at all is the girl.
That's right. That's 100%. So yeah, so she has a little bit of integrity and she recused herself as she should have, and as Clarence Thomas should have in many cases that have come
You
before
mean
the
like where
court.
his wife was basically a defendant in the case?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when the court ties 4-4, then basically that just lets the lower court ruling stand, and so the lower court ruling was like, no,
Which the
you
lower
can't.
court being the Oklahoma Supreme Court, just FYI.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not like so low of a court.
Yeah. But this is really kind of unheard of that this court, the Roberts Court, this is like the only religious freedom case that's ever come before them that hasn't gone the way of the religious nuts.
These folks will not be dissuaded because the likely yes vote recused herself. So yeah, stay tuned.
All right. Well, let's jump in. Okay. So a lot has been happening with IVF. So I want to start off by talking about how last week there was a car bomb that detonated at the Los Angeles Fertility Clinic. The blast gutted this. It's the American Reproductive Center's fertility clinic, and it also injured 4 people.
I think the reporting I saw is the blast could be felt and cause damage 3 blocks away. It was a huge fucking bomb.
Right, it was
a seriously huge fucking bomb.
Right. So in addition to injuring 4 people, it also killed the bomber. So this was a 25-year-old dude. I'm not going to say his name because we don't want to, give him any sort of accolades. But he died in the explosion. The FBI and the people that are investigating this said that he left behind all these anti-pro-life writings. He has all these weird anti-natalist views about how people shouldn't procreate. Of course, no one's released any evidence of that, so we don't know. And so this is
it seemed he's my reaction, of course, immediately was he's probably the same kind of terrorist as the people who bomb abortion clinics. He's a different kind of terrorist,
right?
It turns out, but just equally sort of just bizarre extremist views, but basically about that people shouldn't be procreating.
I mean,
that's the basis, I think.
In general, I don't agree with that, but if you ask me about specific individuals, I might have a different opinion.
No doubt.
To be honest with you.
No doubt. And they're the ones that are always procreating.
Right. Because they're building an army for the Lord.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
which I want to be clear that all of that was very disturbing. I don't want to be dismissive at all about. Just disturbing on a lot of different fronts. That level of extremist violence. We also saw, this past week, the person assassinating, 2 people at the embassy, the Israeli embassy, basically random people that worked at that embassy. All of the extremist rhetoric, it does
it's
have
dangerous.
An impact.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Yeah,
100%. Okay, let's set the stage for what we're going to talk about for the rest of the podcast today. So Republican-led states have threatened IVF access by, they're trying to define life as beginning at conception. We've talked about this already on the podcast, and this is something that, is pervasive in obviously the abortion context, but it also is relevant in IVF. Some conservative groups like Heritage are pushing now the idea that we really should be focused on treating the root cause of infertility directly rather than trying to circumvent it
What's
with medical
the root,
intervention.
what's the
Exactly.
root
Exactly.
cause?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's going to be like people aren't getting married. It's going to be some shit like that.
Maybe.
That's the root cause is the root cause is going to be the ladies want to work outside of the home and people aren't getting married enough. Those are going to be the root causes.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you.
More on that later, but yeah, I mean, it just obviously they fundamentally don't understand how pregnancy works and how
And they
complicated it
fundamentally
is.
don't want the ladies working outside of the home.
That's true. All right.
Yeah.
Fair. All right. So obviously there's tension between support for the procedure and for the laws that have been passed by, so-called pro-life Republicans that grant legal personhood not only to fetuses, but to any embryos that are created in this process.
Right.
So this came to a head a couple years ago with something that happened in Alabama.
Last year.
Last year? Okay. What is time?
I know.
Yeah. So, Ellie, tell us what happened in Alabama.
Yeah, so I guess just for background then, this is a personhood issue. Like a lot of people, a lot of our listeners, of our many, many thousands and thousands of listeners will understand this, that the threat to IVF goes back to personhood. So yeah, like if it's been a long dream, of course, of the right to give legal personhood status to the unborn. So meaning that, you're treated before you're born, from the moment of conception, the moment of fertilization, the moment of whatever the fuck, as a person the same as you would be when you're a born alive person. Like we saw this in Mississippi years ago, probably like about a decade ago. And the main reason that it failed was because of IVF. That was they were able to defeat a ballot initiative on fetal personhood because of IVF. Because like if a preborn person is a person under the law, then it would effectively make IVF impossible, because then you can't cryopreserve an embryo, which means freezing it. Like that's like if I tried to freeze you, Michelle, then I could get like in a lot of trouble. Which, I might want to freeze you, but probably not. But if I were to, I could definitely get in a lot of trouble. But the only way that IVF works is if you freeze, if you cryopreserve embryos. Like otherwise, then it's literally impossible because you can't fertilize and implant all like at the exact same time, basically. Right. There would be homicide laws, there would be criminal battery laws, there would be all of those sorts of things that would apply
to a human.
Correct.
Right.
To IVF, that do apply to a human, that would apply then to an embryo, like a day one fertilized, thing.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. That's the issue. And so in Alabama, what happened is that there was a very unfortunate incident at an IVF clinic where some person got unauthorized access and destroyed some embryos, which was, that's horrible. It's really horrible for the people who, they may not ever be able to create embryos again, women, going through cancer treatment who have, right. Pre-preserved the ability to have children, or, couple, whatever, it's very important, of course, that embryos be sufficiently protected, literally
cared for, right.
Literally sufficiently protected, not legally, literally. So that did not happen in that case. And then it led to a wrongful death lawsuit though. So again, under the same theory that you would have is if your already fully born child was, killed in a car accident or something. And the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that it was the same, that an quote unborn child was from the moment of conception, and that the wrongful death civil statutes applied the same. So it immediately shut down IVF access.
Right, because now they're all thinking, oh my God, we have an insane amount of liability in these situations.
Yes, civil and criminal.
Right.
Again, because if you're recognizing the same rights as a fully formed 2-year-old or a fully formed 5-year-old as you would to a day one fertilized embryo, then it it makes IVF impossible.
How does what happened in Alabama relate to Louisiana's laws? We must have like similar language in our laws.
Well, we have worse language.
Oh,
Really,
really?
but yeah.
Okay.
Basically, right when that happened in Alabama, then people across the country became very, very worried about what could happen for IVF in their state. And in Louisiana, we've always had like this bizarre sort of arcane IVF. Well, I mean, first of all, the laws have not been amended since the 80s when they were first enacted. So that already was a problem, just that they're very old and like just are not at all in keeping with medical practice. But like when they were enacted, then it was like striking this weird sort of balance and like negotiation between like the, pro-life folks and the like, regular medical folks who were trying to allow for reproductive freedom and IVF in the state. IVF created embryos were recognized as, quote, juridical persons, that's like Louisiana speak. It's Louisiana speak for a corporation. So it's already very confusing. Like you can be a natural person under Louisiana law, or you can be a juridical person. A natural person is like you and me. Yeah. It's a, quote, human being. A juridical person is like other personhood status under the law. Like, Citizens United.
Right, yeah.
Other people are persons.
Yeah, corporations are people.
That's right. Corporations are people too.
But they're juridical people.
They're juridical people in Louisiana.
Okay.
But that's always been confusing. And there's a lot of shit in the IVF laws that like can be interpreted in conjunction with other laws that we have. Where this is like in Louisiana, it is a place that is particularly ripe for this exact thing to happen, as happened in Alabama, where a court looks at this and says like, no, like Louisiana law recognizes embryos as human beings. I was Sofia Vergara's lawyer, one of Sofia Vergara's lawyers, in the 2 different times that her fucking ex, Nick Loeb, sued her in Louisiana for this exact reason. Their embryos are in California. They've never been to Louisiana. The embryos have never been to Louisiana. Basically, neither Nick Loeb or Sofia Vergara have ever been here. I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but like not by a lot. But he tried twice to sue her here because the laws were like sort of ripe for personhood status. So like in one of those suits, maybe in both of those, then like the embryos sued themselves. They were because the law
right.
says that they can one of the many amazing things with current law is that embryos can sue or be sued.
Mm-hmm. And so they can get a lawyer.
I've also always made the joke. I want to know. I mean, so they were suing. How can they be sued? But I wanted to find a way to sue those embryos, but we didn't. I didn't come up with what the conventional demand against the embryos. But anyway, the language of the laws are batshit here is the point. So like they were already giving embryos like weird status and saying shit like that like, they can sue or be sued. How that language like could be interpreted with other shit that we already have. As you know, that's all sorts of like, recognizing life from the moment of conception and like in the civil laws, and it talks about like, an unborn child being like a human being from the moment of
fertilization.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. So all sorts of shit like that like I had already seen like how like someone had tried to make the argument that like that's what should be recognized here, which like they didn't have great lawyers. Nick Loeb's a cheap motherfucker, so they didn't have great lawyers, honestly. And it's it would require sort of like an Alabama situation where like judges were like willing to be like, yeah, no, I see this. Like we want to recognize it this way. But so it was like already we were in a position that was like not great, that like some random person and some random judge might be able to interpret our laws in a way that would like outlaw IVF or make it just like completely untenable. So Paula Davis then, a representative in the House, a representative, then she with a lawyer, Katie Bliss, who's really great, who's done a lot of work. Like she represents patients in negotiating agreements with IVF. Like this is like her area of practice, basically. Then they started working on this in like the middle of the session last year. Yeah. to try to basically make sure that we were cleaning up our IVF laws so that this couldn't happen. And like they need that. The laws need to be cleaned up and updated anyway. Like the
Right.
language is just very, very outdated and arcane. Like it's literally from the late 80s when IVF was just starting anyway.
Yeah. So that bill made it almost all the way through the process last year. And then at the very end of the session, there was like a poison pill amendment that was added to it. So it didn't end up moving all the way forward.
Well, so I mean, we talked about this, I think, a little bit at the beginning of the session when we were discussing that there were two IVF bills, right? There was the Senator Presley bill and the Paul Davis bill that were identical bills and that were like pretty close to what like we had all come to as like what it should be last session. But there was also like mad opposition from the right, as we're going to get into, but also mad opposition from the left. Like
Yeah.
it was like a bunch of fucking bullshit. And like that reminds me a lot of like our conversation with Hadley Duvall about like people on the left from out of state fighting us about,
expecting that we're going to get some
Yeah.
perfect solution
Tell us-
when we try to
Tell us,
legislate.
Michelle, about how we have to deal with that kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, it's really frustrating. This happens a lot that, people who are our allies in the reproductive, health rights justice movement that fundamentally don't understand the reality of what we're dealing with
Yes.
here in states like Louisiana,
Yes.
red states all over the country, that, we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
No.
Sometimes we just like have to try to move the
Yes.
ball forward as best we can,
Yes.
considering
So
the
that
fucking
was,
crazy people that we're dealing with.
yeah, 100%. So there was, Senator Seabaugh did add what he proudly called, actually, in the in the Senate committee this time, like, I think I added a poison pill amendment. I mean, it wasn't my intention, which yes, it fucking was his intention. But the truth is that because the bill had been introduced quickly and was coming together quickly, and there was like all sorts of opposition, including from like people on our own fucking side, but not people in Louisiana. Like the people who were working on that bill were every fucking doctor that practices in this space, the only lawyer who really does, like, in terms of patient, like
Advocacy, yeah.
Yeah. And then me, who got involved, was the only person who's ever litigated a case that had anything to do with this. So, like, we had all the people that we needed. But there was all this fucking pushback about, like, well, you guys are leaving the juridical personhood language. That was the big thing. It's like, yeah, because, like, there is no fucking way that this bill is ever getting through our legislature if we take out the extra special protections that have been like given to these embryos, which,
Right.
as we'll see, I mean, like, they are not trying to do nobody tried to do that last session. No one's trying to do that now. And like the opposition is fierce from the right. And the thing that's frustrating to me is that, like, while like optically, and so this is the problem with like people from out of state, optically, like, that is a bad look, right? Like, it is like providing, quote, personhood status, except again, having been somebody who litigated a case like this, it actually is meaningless in the law.
Right.
Like, it doesn't actually do anything. The way that language is going to get interpreted with other language, that's never going to be a problem. There's other parts of the law that are what need to be changed to make sure that we don't end up in an Alabama situation. We can keep that fucking stupid juridical personhood language and never end up in an Alabama situation.
So the bill that starts moving this year is Senator Presley's bill. It's
Right.
Senate Bill 156. There have been now two hearings. So there was one on the Senate side, and then there was one on the House side.
So the bill, so it's the same as the bill that Senator Presley has introduced, and that had the identical one on Paula Davis's side, it's trying to update the law so that it's not so outdated. It has all kinds of just language that like doesn't really make any sense. Because they just didn't really know what IVF was going to be like, when 40 years ago the law was passed. So, not realizing that, like, there's going to be agreements between partners and the clinic for like every single procedure. There's a lot of language in it that's about like which we'll get into this, that's like about, it's like very parental language,
Right.
and about like adoption versus like donation. And that like that becomes important, as we'll talk about, with like why the trying to reduce the chances of it being personhoody in how it's going to get interpreted. But it's also just because when the bill was passed, and like nobody really, there wasn't the language to talk about these things. And so the law is not doing what it needs to do to begin with. Like it's vastly out of keeping with what like
Actual practices.
Yes, exactly. So it needs to be updated. And then the liability part, in terms of what potential like criminal or civil liability, that needs to be like clarified, so that we don't end up in an Alabama situation where then doctors are so worried that they could be criminally or civilly liable under the existing law. And then like fundamentally, then it's cleaning up the language of the law in terms of the definitions. We're going to hear a lot about like the definitions need to be cleaned up, so that it can't be interpreted with other statutes that we have, other sort of disparate parts of our law, to equate an embryo, a cryopreserved embryo, like an out of uterus embryo, to equate that with a human being. Because if we equate that under the law with a human being, then we're in a full personhood situation.
In the House of Representatives, a former member of our legislature actually came and testified, and his testimony, I think, was really great.
No bleeding heart liberal.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Not any big like friend of abortion rights.
No, but he's not he's not a crazy person. I don't think. I don't know. Anyway, so he came and testified in support of what Senator Presley was doing.
You want to see young people flock out of the state of Louisiana faster, then don't protect IVF. I mean, let's be honest and real with everybody in the committee. If you want to see young families leave the state at a more alarming rate than they already are doing, don't protect IVF, right? Because there's nothing me and my family would have not have done to make that happen. We would have moved countries to have a family, right? The moment after they're born, everybody who is a part of the religious community wants them. Nobody tells them no. They'll take you into Catholic school. They'll take you into any Christian private university. Every single one of the people who seem to have an issue or could have an issue, they don't raise those objections when you bring your dollars to them and say, hey, educate my child. Hey, take my donation for this. So I always find it kind of confusing to me that there ever is opposition to children, right? I just don't understand it, because this is about the only point where they have it at. And it makes no sense. You would think that wanting to be a family and wanting to have kids and bring life into the world is somehow not a pro-life position. I don't even understand how it makes sense.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about one of the issues that the right to life people raised is this idea of donation versus adoption.
Yeah.
So the current law has language around people being able to, if they're not going to use the embryo, they can then someone can adopt that embryo. And what they want to do is change the language to allow people to donate the embryo to another person, another couple, whatever.
Well, so one thing, so there's sort of two things here. And like when I was in discussions with people last year, because one of the right now it's that you can donate / adopt whatever to another married couple. That's it.
Right.
But like that's fucking crazy shit, right? That like it would just be like to a married couple, like all of the time, of course, like single women for starters, like want to have children. You don't have to be married to do that. You shouldn't have to be married to do that. So like getting rid of that language is always going to be like alarm bells on the right, like all the family values are getting taken out of the IVF laws. The adoption versus donation language does not make sense. It doesn't make any sense. But they like the values driven part of it.
Right.
So they would rather keep language in the law that like 100% might like end up with like being interpreted in a personhood kind of way that's going to make all of this impossible, but not just like updating it to be like in reality, and also in a way that yes it's not your preferred values driven statement, but otherwise maybe nobody can do it at all.
Well, so let's listen to what Dorinda Plaisance, who
Yes.
is a lawyer who has basically drafted a
I have a
ton.
million things to say about Dorinda that we can say. Play the clip, Michelle. Play the
Okay.
clip. Play that clip, and then we'll talk about Dorinda.
While it's reasonable for an industry that helps people in a tough situation to want to have reasonable liability limits, that can't go so far as to have other impacts in the bill that takes away protections that these parents would want to have, that any parent, I as a parent or as a grandmother, would want to have. If there's no incentive for negligent treatment of the human beings at the embryo stage that are mistreated, that are now subject to being donated as property to a person rather than adopted to a family, then we lose every protection. The word parent is taken out. The word adoption by notarial act is taken out. In place of it, it says that a contract can allow for the donation. One of your grandchildren that's conceived by IVF, currently under law, could be adopted out. There would be a process where we look at the parents. Are they fit parents? Are they someone where we would want our children to be raised? That would be gone. Children that would be given to a person, but no longer has a record of what is their medical background, what kind of nationality or genetic traits should I look out for. That is all wiped out in this bill. They could be donated to a person. That person could be a corporation where there could be grown into parts for biotech research, or worse.
We're gonna do the or worse later because
We're going to do the or worse in a minute.
So Dorinda, all right, she and I know each other well. She has been my absolute enemy on the other side for a million years. She's like the legal mastermind on their side. So yeah, like every law basically that's ever been written here that is like a bad abortion restriction, Dorinda wrote that law. But now she comes back. She's in retirement now. They bring her out of retirement every once in a while to come back and testify and stuff. So always good seeing Dorinda and always good hearing her kind of insane perspective. So yeah, this is like, she's also like insinuating here that what's going on now with if it's my embryo, me and whomever's embryo, that there's a full adoption process that's happening where people are having background checks, again, if there was a born alive person, there is no way that is happening. That is complete insanity. I mean, complete insanity. And it's just so much of what she is saying is it's not the way that things are working now. It's not the way that things ever should work. And mostly she's just upset about the language being changed because it's less personhoody, which again is that's the whole problem here. That's the zero sum of this, is that they want maximum personhood language because they believe that a 1 second old embryo 1 second after fertilization, that thing should be given the same legal status as your 2-year-old child, your already 2-year-old child, that those should be legally equivalent. And what of course the proponents of the changes to the bill are saying is that if we do that, it will make IVF impossible. So that's real zero sum.
Yeah, that's the crux of it. So she goes on to talk about, or worse, what could be worse. And so I want to play that. So you're going to hear Dorinda, and then you're going to hear Representative Weibel ask a question. And then at the end, you're going to hear Representative Chad Brown.
We know that there is child human trafficking in this country, and we don't know where these children would go without the protections of adoption.
Dorinda is suggesting that IVF might be being used to cultivate children, to like literally grow children for the purposes of trafficking, of human trafficking. Like that is so beyond insane.
Yeah. I mean, it's so insane that Representative Weibel thinks it's.
That's right. And he's really conservative. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody around there, I'm sure he'd be happy to hear, that have like more like conservative bona fides than he does.
Yeah. Okay.
I've done a lot of work through my career with child victims of sexual abuse, severe physical abuse, trafficking, and you made that reference.
Yes.
Do you have any data or examples where through IVF, basically you suggested we're cultivating children to traffic? I mean, is that a thing? Is that really happening?
And so when you're dealing with child trafficking ring, which is something that is very hidden in the dark, my point is I can't say here on the corner of Orleans Avenue we have this, but I can tell you that when I'm looking closely at the law, it takes out the protections of adoption and says it can be donated to a person. Once that person brings it to a gestational surrogate in a country like India, and then where that child ends up, we have no longer any control on that.
Both of these are very sensitive issues to me.
Yes, yes.
But we don't just throw around
Sure.
some causation. As we're trying to help families in their IVF journey, that we don't conflate or conflict these issues.
Yeah. So like all true facts from Rep. Weibel, again, like a very conservative person, but like, I mean, I just want to like really reiterate the insanity of this. I mean, like, not only like, first of all, IVF is very expensive. It's very expensive. So like the notion that would be like how we're like getting kids, how like bad people are getting kids to traffic is insane. Yeah. Second of all, there's like, she makes it seem like that, like, you know, the way that things are now, like no child created through IVF could ever be, you know, anything bad could happen to them. We've got like this strict system in place. Like not true, like obviously, and also not true then again about like all the fucking kids that are born through whatever means, right? I mean, what for sure is not happening is that people are spending $10,000 to $20,000 to create a child for the purposes of human trafficking. There would be about like 1,000 easier and cheaper ways if that was your plan.
Yeah, it's crazy. But
yeah,
there's a reason that she brings.
That's right, as Rep. Brown says.
It seems like anytime that we want to support or kill a bill, we bring up human trafficking. Human trafficking is one of the worst things that exists in our society. But when we start bringing into the IVF discussion, you say you support IVF, well, I think you bring things like that to kill us bill.
Yeah, and you and I know this very, very well, as does Dorinda. She like talked about, you know, some of her bona fides about, you know, I've been on the human trafficking council, blah, 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 and all that sort of shit. And again, like human trafficking is like, it always sounds like we are sort of, you know, when we bitch about this, that we are diminishing that issue. And that is not true. Like, I mean, that is not our intent. Exactly. Like human trafficking is a real problem. But what he is saying, Dorinda has done this a million times. That's why she's pulling out. It's like pulling out some of the greatest hits. Let's go with some of the greatest hits. See if we can use these. That like in the abortion context, we saw this year after year after year. That like if they could find any way to sort of try to tie the issue to human trafficking, then it would be like, oh well, we gotta do this, or oh we can't do that. So it's a complete red herring. And yeah, like even these motherfuckers see it in this context. That again, like it doesn't sound like probably very like you know, convincing that that one of the impacts of the changes to this law is gonna be some real increase in human trafficking.
Yeah, cultivating children at $25,000
a pop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we also had Damon Cudahy testify in opposition to this bill, and we're gonna let him introduce himself, and then we'll talk about him.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Damon Cudahy, and I'm also a board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist. I've been practicing here in Louisiana for 12 years. I was also honored to serve as the lead witness for the Louisiana Department of Health pertaining to reproductive health when there were challenges to legislation we had passed at the federal level.
Oh no, I mean he did serve as an expert. I liked it that he called himself the lead witness, I think, for the Department of Health. He did testify in he's talking about the admitting privileges case. And yeah, what he fails to disclose, and I have brought this to some people's attention before at the legislature, is that a federal judge specifically found him to be not credible. There is a published federal court decision that finds him to be a not credible expert on the issue of abortion because there was so much evidence of his bias. So, yeah, maybe you shouldn't like keep going to the legislature and touting how you were the lead expert. Yeah, you were the lead expert who a federal judge found to be not credible in a case that Louisiana lost the whole fucking way up. There's like only a handful of OBGYNs who are, you know, very, very fringe doctors that they can get to come to the legislature because there are only a handful of very, very fringe doctors that support their position.
So I think one of the things that is interesting to me is that they're so concerned about this adoption versus donation aspect of the changes that they're making to the law. Regular parents don't have to go enter into these, you know, and I don't want to say regular, but I mean, people that are, you know, procreating through natural means, not using IVF, like they don't have to enter into any sort of agreement about like what is going to happen to their child.
No.
Or any of that. None of that is required. But if you are doing in vitro, then you put together these, you know, very,
Extensive
very,
agreements.
very detailed agreements that include all of this information. And so they're making it seem like the change to donation is going to have some sort of profound impact on how these embryos are treated throughout this process, but I don't really think that that's the case.
No, I mean, yeah, the word donation, the reason that they're objecting to it is that they think that like it is implying property as opposed to personhood, which again is part of what needs to happen in the law, is that we're getting away from personhood language. That is actually the problem, and why we could end up in a situation where no one's able to like access this process or able to you know, provide this care, like, period. But it has nothing to do with how people are handling these situations. Like, you know, we were talking about earlier, like, I know people who have left embryos in their wills, like to their sisters, you know, like that. If you want or need to have a child, then I am leaving this to you. Like, it is something that people treat as like absolutely like precious cargo, you know, that like they have in their care. And not just like in wills, but also, you know, if like you do have a cryopreserved embryo and you do want to donate it to someone else, then like that is like an extremely personal thing that people do. You know, like you have a friend who wants to have a child, right, and you know you are talking to them about that and donating it to them as something that is precious to you and is precious to them. Like there's nothing that's happening with whether you use the word donate or you use the word like adopt. Like the language is only important in terms of how it could be misinterpreted in the law to make this whole thing illegal. It is not that like that language changes what's happening in reality in terms of how people feel about these things. Like, again, it's very expensive to create embryos through IVF. It's very expensive. And it's very, as Tanner, as we listened to before, you know, former Rep. McGee, like, you know, people are desperate to have children. People who are having fertility issues are desperate to have children. or people who, like, couples or people who can't become pregnant without IVF, either because like you're a gay couple or you are a single woman and you need this process. So it is like, this is like something that is absolutely precious that people are passing on to others. It's not like I donated my shit to the Goodwill.
Yeah.
Which is basically how they're acting like that. If we change the words to donation, then it's going to be like, can you like basically like come pick up like my trash?
Yeah. Or like I could pull up to one of the like clothing boxes and just like, shove a petri dish into that. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Goodwill needs to come pick up my $25,000 embryo. No, this is always going to be like, a process of that's rigorously controlled legally in terms of contracts, which in general our law like it defers to contractual arrangements. Between people who wanted to create these things and people who really want to accept them.
Right. So one of the things that doctor, and I'm putting doctor in air quotes, Cudahy brought up in his opposition testimony was about viability and the definition of viability.
Yeah.
So they are making some changes to that definition in the law. So I'm going to play what he says, and then you can explain why he's wrong, basically.
When we speak about non-viable in this bill, we need to make it clear what is, which most lay people, non-physicians, would assume is meant by non-viable. Most of us would assume that non-viable is synonymous with dead, but the language really suggests more of something analogous to terminal, meaning that the physicians or the embryologist has judged this child is unlikely to survive to a live birth.
When we talk about viability, the concern is that we don't want there to be arbitrary standards that allow an embryo to be determined to be non-viable and therefore to be discarded, essentially.
Yeah, so Ben Clapper is the person that you heard at the end.
Some of these embryos then like that, they're never going to
develop into
that's right.
a fetus that then could be carried to term.
That's right. Yeah. So like Cudahy and Clapper, and there was like a various of them that were like, talking about this like in terms of basically like you're, by terming it non-viable, then you're making it, seem like some sort of a lesser person, like a lesser embryo, which like, I mean, I guess that's accurate. I mean, the point is that like it has not developed outside of the uterus enough to ever have like scientific evidence that it will develop in utero to a live birth.
Right.
So that's just the reality. Like there's nothing that's like bad. There's nothing that's nefarious about that.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's like bad or good about that. That's just like, it's the same as if it were in utero that like, embryos do not always develop into a live birth. Quite often people have miscarriages. It's exactly the equivalent of like, if it had been implanted, that it would have ended in a miscarriage.
Right.
But you're not going to then go through the process of like surgically implanting an embryo that's going to end up miscarrying.
But maybe that's what they would want to happen, is that they think that all of these embryos should be given the chance. They should be given the chance.
Or just that they should be like preserved for forever because it's already a person. Like this is like, it's already a person. It's just like, a flawed person, or I don't know. I mean, it's again, where like the logic of recognizing personhood from minute one of fertilization, even when it's not in utero, and equating that to the same as like if you had like a developmentally disabled, like 2-year-old, like these things are not like in no way similar. Right. They're just not like, in a regular person's mind, those things are not similar. Like, of course you would never be like, well, somebody like doesn't need to really like, go ahead and keep caring for their 2-year-old if they're like, maybe they won't make it to age 8. So, maybe we just like, don't worry about caring for that 2-year-old. No one would say that.
Right.
But like, would you say that about like an 8-day-old cryopreserved embryo that is not going to end in a live birth, yes, you would say that. We don't need to keep caring for that. We don't need to make sure that that quote unquote life is preserved.
Yeah, so the current law, and again, it's really outdated, and there's some explanation for this from some of the doctors that are proponents of the bill that's being proposed. But the current law requires like that the embryo be given 36 hours to develop. And that's not really in accordance with practice at this point. And actually, practice now allows
Is to wait
for
longer.
to wait
Yeah.
longer, right?
Yeah.
To like give even more time. So one of the changes that they proposed was like, well, why don't we? And because you don't know whether it's going to be 36 hours before you know or 7 days before you know, why don't we just make it so that at some point viability is based on developmental milestones,
That's
right?
right.
And so that's what they wanted to do with the law, and the right to life is like freaking out about that because they're like, no, we have to put like an 8 like a day
This
limit.
right. This goes back to just like the how they are so skeptical of doctors and women in like a way that is really just like insane.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, when you talk to any of these doctors, let alone the fucking patient, then obviously like this process again, it's painful and it's expensive, and it's people are going through it who are desperately trying to have a child. So like, you know, there's every effort is going to be made to try to make sure that like we have like exhausted all possibilities that this embryo is going to develop into a place where we think that it could be viably implanted. There's no world in which people are going to be trying to like short circuit that and be like, now this one, let's just get rid of this one. It's fine. Like, and that's of course like what the rates are. They're like, we need, parameters on this. We need to make sure that like, doctors aren't acting badly and like patients aren't acting badly, that like they're just like, not waiting long enough or just like arbitrarily being like, not viable. Throw that one out. Like that's never going to happen. Like trusting doctors and trusting women it's just the exact same thing as what's happening in the abortion space, where like they like we need a lot of laws to make sure that these people aren't acting badly. Like these people are not going to be acting badly. These people are desperately trying to get this embryo to a point of viability. They're never going to be like
Arbitrarily
shortchanging that.
just like
ever.
deciding, okay.
Eh.
Oh my God. All right. There were a lot of other things that came up, a lot of other questions. So I would like us to introduce a new segment into the podcast that we're going to call Asked and Answered. Okay. So we're going to start with a question from Representative Gloria.
Asked and answered, just so folks know, it's also Michelle, and I love it because even though she only plays a lawyer on TV, then that is a very sort of ubiquitously used objection.
Yeah.
Objection, asked and answered.
Yeah. Yeah. That Trump's press secretary uses it all the time.
Oh, yeah?
Mhm.
That's hilarious.
She's even less of a lawyer than I am. Okay.
A lot less.
All right. So our first question comes from Representative Glorioso.
Right now in the statute, we have a definition of human embryo, which I believe is the same as the definition that is in this bill as in vitro fertilized human embryo. But I do agree with the attorney at the table that the bill as it's written is inconsistent with our law, because unless I'm reading it wrong, it says in several spots that a in vitro fertilized human embryo is a juridical person. Then it talks about donation. You cannot donate a person. And it also says that an in vitro fertilized human embryo is not susceptible of ownership, which is true because it's a juridical person, and a person is not subject to ownership. So that does need to be rectified. But what I really don't understand is why we now have a different definition for human embryo and in vitro, and maybe the doctor can explain that to me, because it seems to me that internally inconsistent with the rest of the bill, in that I believe what it's trying to do is to have one type of embryo that's treated as property and one type of embryo that's treated as a person, but I don't understand from the bill where the distinction lies.
Thank you for asking, Rep. Glorioso.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the answer is a little bit more complicated. Like he is not wrong, as we were talking about before, that like there's a lot of inconsistencies with like the language that is being used in current law as well as like in the proposed changes to it. He is someone who voted against this bill in the end, so that's worth knowing in the committee, because so while he's recognizing that there's conflicting language and conflicting definitions, what he's not understanding is that and this was like consistent throughout this hearing, is that there keeps being talked about like, can't y'all just work along? Can't you just like get along and come up with it? Are we just talking about the language? Is that all we're talking about? Is the language? Which I wanted to be like, that's all we're ever talking about, motherfuckers. Are you just disagreeing about the language of the bill? Yes. What are people otherwise disagreeing about other than the language of the bill? But yeah, here the language of the bill is really important, because what they want, again, what the people who are opposing the changes want, is for an embryo to be defined as a human being. And the problem with that is that all of our homicide statutes talk about that the homicide is the killing of a human being.
Right.
So this is exactly what we were talking about earlier, that like there's are very clear ways that the IVF laws could be interpreted
If we're
with other
defining it
existing
as a human
laws.
being,
Yes.
then
You
all
cannot-
of those laws that apply
Correct.
to human beings
You
would
cannot say
apply.
that.
Right.
You can't. And they did like a very good workaround with amending it in the Senate committee so that now the definition is biologically human, which I thought was actually a really good compromise. But of course it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Like that they want the definition to be is a human being. And if that's the definition, then we have not gotten ourselves out of an Alabama problem. In fact, we've gotten ourselves more into one. So that's the problem, Rep. Glorioso. And for all the other people on the committee who were like very confused as to why can we not just get along, it's because like that's a zero-sum issue. Like they want they being the clappers of the world want an embryo defined as a human being from the moment of fertilization. And if we do that, then it makes it so that IVF could be illegal, like absolutely illegal, criminally illegal in our state at any time if a court just like if the issue comes to a court to interpret.
Right. Okay. Our next question comes from Representative Carlson.
Representative Carlson for a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along those lines that Rep. Glorioso was going down, I just want to ensure that right now in the state, is it illegal to destroy an embryo?
Yes. Yes, it is. Thank you for asking. Louisiana is the only state in the country that has a law that prohibits the intentional destruction of embryos, which already again makes like the state like an outlier. In addition to the juridical personhood language, and we also have this specific law, which then what that means is that like embryos then are whether viable or not viable, they're just like persisting in cryopreservation like
Definitely.
in perpetuity.
Right.
Which like someone has to pay for that. Like literally it's expensive for clinics to continue to cryopreserve all the stuff that we've talked about, that like someone could come in and interfere, yada yada. Like, so there's lots of like legal agreements that go into place about like how long things will be cryopreserved and how much you have to pay to do it. And then for clinics then, because I've represented a bunch of doctors, like separate from Sophia Vergara's case, also represented doctors that are dealing with this, where like patients will just eventually stop paying because like it's, that they're long past this point, like they're long past where they want to continue to be paying for cryopreservation. So then clinics are just having to keep on doing that. And like because of all the legal agreements, there's nothing else for them to do. There's no way for them to deal with the situation.
Right. The answer that Erica from the Louisiana Right to Life gave was long and kind of went down this winding
Yeah,
path.
I don't really. I mean,
A lot of skepticism
that's
about
right.
what the answer may be.
That's
to
right.
That.
She said, I mean, which is it's fair. I mean, she said it's prohibited, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's illegal. I mean, which I guess is fair. I mean, like I want to say many of the things that they're saying, of course, like in relation to this bill, I'm like, can you fucking hear yourself? Can you fucking hear yourself? Like the language of a bill matters. Like, we'll be getting into like, HB 575 this week where it's like, they're like, no, I mean, like, this is just what we intend, we intend with the bill. That has like no relationship to what the language of the bill is. And then with this, she's like, I mean, this is in the civil laws, so I don't know what would happen in the criminal laws. Like, just the way that they're approaching this, and the way that they approach, of course, like all of the like just vastly, vastly expansive stuff that they want to do in other areas is just it's infuriating.
Okay. Last thing that I clip from the hearing in the House that I wanted to play was Representative Edmonston. At the end of the hearing, fundamentally, she just really wanted to know where the right to life was going to come down on this bill. So I'm going to play a clip of her exchange with Ben Clapper.
This is the language of the bill.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it true that all you object to is the language in that the bill is written in?
We would like to see the language change, yes. Now, whether we can get there with Senator Presley, and that's something we can continue to work at, and we have worked at it. We're not there at this point, and so I think that's why.
Is the language the only thing in the bill that you object to? Nothing else in the bill that you object to?
By that you mean what the three things I've brought forward, or
is that the only thing that you are objecting to? I just want to make sure that y'all are good with the bill except for the language that you have discussed.
I mean, we are. I mean, I think we're going to be neutral on the bill.
I mean, she literally had to ask him multiple times. He was not going to give her a straight answer. And I love at the end that he's like, I mean, we'll be neutral on the bill.
Which, I mean, in fairness,
that's
the
most you can ask for.
That is the most you can ask for, and which, I mean, I think that is being fair to him. That is the most that like they would ever be. But the problem being is that they had said, of course, a million times already at the table that like, we're not opposed to IVF. We're not opposed to IVF. They are opposed to IVF. They are 100% opposed to IVF. So yes, like Clapper's never going to get beyond neutral. And again, we're like this with some bills. You can get us to neutral. We're never going to support it. But it was so funny to me on so many levels. Because like, number one, it's like, other than the language of the bill, like, what do you mean other than the fucking language of the bill? What are we ever here talking about other than the language of the bill? And with this bill in particular, that it's been like extensive discussion about the definitions, like that, like the very, very specific language of the bill was what the problem is. So I did feel for Clapper a little bit that it's like, that's a confusing question. Other than the language of the bill.
I mean,
It's like, well, other than the language of the bill, wait, what? And yeah, no, finally I'll say, we ain't never going to support this fucking bill.
Yeah, we're never going to support it.
We don't support IVF. So yeah, other than the language, which is the whole thing about the bill, you are correct. If we get to that, we will still just like be like, don't do the bill.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
I just find it like extraordinary. And we've talked about this obviously before, but like they need Ben Clapper to come to the table and give them permission to support the bill.
Which Edmondson did not.
She did not. And neither did Carlson.
I've ever seen
and neither did
someone's
Weibel.
Face as no, Weibel did.
Oh, he did.
He
Okay.
did. I don't think but Glorioso didn't. I don't know that I've ever seen someone's face as pissed off as Presley's was when he was listening to the vote count on the bill, because again, he's not a friend of ours by any stretch of the imagination. Folks will know.
I mean, we're literally suing over
That's
the
right.
law that he
Folks-
passed last
folks-
year.
Folks will remember, yes. But because of that, I think he's just like, he cannot believe like how extreme these people are, which I'm like, welcome to the party, friend. Welcome
I
to
know.
the party. These people roll extreme. And yeah, that like, the semantics of like, again, the semantics are really important with this bill from our perspective, because we've already seen a court interpret language that like is currently in the law and that they would like to keep or include in the law in a way that would outlaw IVF.
Right.
So like, that's not hyperbolic. That has already happened, and the Alabama legislature had to come back into session and like solve that. So like, that's very real that could happen here. And notwithstanding that, then like, the right to life, all they want to do is be like, this is a values issue. We need our language, yada, yada, yada. And I think that like, that level of just like never ever being able to compromise, never ever being able to recognize like the real issues that are being raised like on the other side. I mean, welcome to the party, Senator Presley.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so the bill passed out of committee, just so folks know. And
Scheduled
then
for the floor.
it's going to be
on Tuesday.
It's going to be on the floor in the House on Tuesday, and we'll see what
That's right.
happens. There may be more crazy amendments that are brought, or maybe there will be some compromise on the language.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe. I mean, but I hope I'm confident that folks on our side understand like which was not understood in the committee. All this talk about like compromise, there is some zero sum on this on the language.
Somebody's
So
got to give. Yeah.
you can, yeah. I mean, there can be some workarounds on some things. Like the bill at this point is already like, it is a very compromised version again of like what anyone on our side would want. So there is very, very little to give. There just is. There's very, very little that can be given on the side of people who are trying to protect IVF.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, I guess I'll just state for the record that an embryo is not a human being. There was a lot of upset, consternation when the thing happened in Alabama, and then Congress tried to do something on IVF, and then a bunch of Republicans voted against it.
Yep, including Mike Johnson.
Right.
Yours truly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so then, during the campaign, Trump was like, oh, I'm going to protect IVF. What did he call himself? The fertility president? Oh my God.
The
Anyway,
greatest defender, the greatest probably was greatest.
I think he
protector.
called
I don't
himself the
remember.
fertility president.
I don't know.
We'll
That's-
find the clip.
that's-
Anyway, so he, one of the first things that he does is introduce this executive order called Expanding Access to In Vitro Fertilization. So this is what it says. It is the policy of my administration to ensure reliable access to IVF treatment, including by easing unnecessary statutory or regulatory burdens to make IVF treatment drastically more affordable. So this week, they apparently recommendations for how to do what he wants to do with this EO came to him, and he's reviewing them.
Well, because he declared on the campaign trail that he was going to make insurance companies pay for IVF,
which
I mean that would be great. We'll see that when it happens. Like you don't just like that doesn't happen by executive order. I mean, like the Affordable Care Act did not do that. But I mean, it mandated that, insurance coverage had to do a bunch of shit. Like, that's the only way you get something like that done, that just like you're making private companies do something that they don't want to do, is through something called legislation, which Trump might not have heard of.
Yeah.
In the real world, in the non-Trump world, where executive orders don't just like say what things do and what they don't do. And yeah, I don't think they can get that through the House.
Yeah. Well, it probably will be completely meaningless. He'll like a handful of people will be able to get access to IVF. But then they won't in red states because we have these fucked up crazy laws and these definitions.
No, Trump's
that
just
don't
gonna
make
do
sense.
like I did it. I signed the executive order. Yeah, it did nothing, because turns out you can't make sweeping changes to healthcare without legislation.
All right, this has been a good conversation, a long one. We're gonna wrap up. I'm going to do our closeout today because we have a new thing. And
what's new?
So the new thing is we're just asking people to leave a review or a comment. We really want to hear from you. So this is how you can do
Michelle is
this.
exhausted. Can you hear her? Can you hear it in her voice? Just do it, people.
Please.
Just do it.
I mean,
just do the thing she's saying.
It's really sad to me because I'm checking to see who's like listening, who's watching, who's like
we also
following
know
the
you guys
podcast.
are,
And I know people are listening to the podcast. They ain't telling us. So just tell us. Please write us a review. It's a little complicated. In Apple Podcasts, you can scroll down to the ratings and reviews section, and then you just tap write a review. Okay.
It's not complicated.
It's not complicated.
Yeah.
But in Spotify, you can't write like a review of the whole podcast, but you can comment on the episode. So that is what we're encouraging people to do. And I don't know what the rules are on any of the other podcast thingies. You'll have to look that up, ask ChatGPT or whatever. But those are the two that the most people are listening on. So you have instructions. Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
All right, rate, review, prescribe, or subscribe, either one.
We'll talk to y'all next week. Seriously is presented by Lift Louisiana, a nonprofit organization advocating for reproductive health rights and justice.